More ways to make money here.
But Duncan McHugh sees some men moving on down.
I just want to see a job come and stay.
If you eagerly filled out your census last year, consider today your statistical Christmas. The first results are out, and we're learning more about Canada's population. The big number is 35 million, and then some, 5% higher than in 2011. Growth from two sources, a third from the natural cycle of births and deaths, the rest from newcomers to this country. But what's distinct isn't only immigration, it's migration, and how the numbers reveal a shift to the west. Carolyn Dunn explains.
St. John Bourget is fulfilling a dream, studying video game design in Edmonton. He moved from Fredericton to Alberta a year and a half ago.
There's nothing going on in New Brunswick for me. There wasn't really much opportunity. There's more people willing to help you get to where you want to be. There's more ways to make money here.
Bourget's is the kind of story that has Alberta leading the country in population growth. According to the latest census, between 2011 and 2016, population in Alberta exploded by 11.6%. In the same period, Saskatchewan grew by 6.3%, Manitoba by 5.8%, and BC by 5.6%.
We see that growth, however, concentrated more in the west than in the east. Alberta far and away the fastest growing province, despite a bit of a pullback over the last 2 years.
Even though the census doesn't reflect the second half of 2016, an economically tough time in Alberta, the shift westward is clear. Don't they just know it in New Brunswick, the only province to see a decrease since the last census. It lost 0.5% of its population in those 5 years.
That's a major challenge. So that's why we're promoting that all throughout the country and within our province, and trying to bring New Brunswickers back home, trying to bring new Canadians to New Brunswick.
Where are they going?
We know from other data sources that people that are leaving Atlantic provinces, New Brunswick for example, are moving mainly towards Ontario and Alberta.
And they're part of another trend that stood out in the census, urban spread. Like Beaumont, Alberta, originally a farming village outside Edmonton, now it's the 5th fastest growing town in the country. And that's happening all over Canada as more people move to suburbs and outer edges of cities. But it's not financially or environmentally sustainable to service the urban sprawl. So even Beaumont has a plan to grow within existing borders.
Help our communities become dense and service them more efficiently, then we'll start to see less of a need of growing out and more growing up.
This is the census that almost didn't happen. It was cut in 2010 by the Harper Conservatives and resurrected last year. Still to come, data on immigration, education, income, and a host of other demographics. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
Walls, trade deals under fire, a White House policy of America first. These days, it may seem the global village is being abandoned for tighter borders. Canadian officials were in Washington today to defend cross-border trade against Donald Trump's talk of tariffs. But that's hardly the only border concern between Canada and the U.S. Another has to do with a wide open area. We've been telling you recently about would-be refugees heading north, crossing near Emerson, Manitoba, a journey often dangerous for asylum seekers and constantly alarming for security officials. Karen Pauls crossed into the U.S. to trace the paths.
This is a decommissioned port of entry. I'm standing on the American side, just across that barricade there. That's Canada. And this is how easy it is to cross the border on foot.
Some people stick to the trees, some walk on the rail line. All come under the cover of darkness, says U.S. Border Patrol Officer Eric Kuhn.
This is one of the areas where they have found to be the best spot for them to cross.
To the east, some asylum seekers cross near a set of Trans-Canada natural gas pipeline pumping stations on either side of the border. The other route is further west and involves a much longer trek over snowy farmers' fields.
It's quite a long walk, but it's about a mile and a half in the U.S. and then several miles in Canada.
People crossing here are much less likely to be discovered, but they do risk frostbite and worse if they can't get a cell signal to call 911 or they're unable to flag down help quickly on the Canadian side. That was the case of two Ghanaian men who lost fingers and toes to frostbite after crossing on Christmas Eve. So far, the flood seems to be in one direction, north to Canada. But Kuhn says American authorities are worried that open doorway will also allow people to enter the U.S.
We can't be so naive to think that this is just within a refugee community, that it's just a bunch of good folks looking to find a place to live that are hearing this. If they're hearing about it, terrorism suspects could be hearing about it, drug traffickers, human traffickers.
Kuhn doesn't believe this increase is directly related to the new Trump administration and the recently announced immigration policies. This immigration lawyer disagrees. Mark Prokish says the political uncertainty is creating fear and panic for many of his clients.
I can hear that in their voices, that they are scared of the new administration, that they are scared of the deportation officers saying it's time for you to get your passport and start planning to go.
But he's heard the stories of those who have nearly frozen to death crossing over into Canada.
And that's why I'm saying don't do it, don't do it. I mean, you've made it out of a dangerous situation. Don't put yourself back into another dangerous situation.
For many asylum seekers, though, the risk is worth it. Karen Pauls, CBC News, near Pembina, North Dakota.
While border officials near Emerson face the flow of asylum seekers heading north, one Montreal woman was heading south to visit family and was blocked at the border. Her story is raising concerns that a new tone in Washington could mean trouble for travelers who look and pray a certain way. Alison Northcott has that story.
Youssef, viens. Oh, oui.
Fadwa Alawi wanted to take her 5-year-old son to the U.S. last weekend to celebrate the end of his chemotherapy. It's a trip she's made many times before without issue. But this time, she says, U.S. border agents questioned her, then turned her away.
He told me, "You are Muslim, right?" I said, "Yes." He told me, "Do you practice your religion?" I said, "Yes." So he asked me, "Which mosque do you go? What is the imam's name? Where do you pray?" Pictures at the hospital.
She says they also asked about her family, what she thought about U.S. President Donald Trump, and about videos on her cell phone, some of people praying in Arabic. She says they took her fingerprints and photo, then refused her entry to the U.S.
The officer, she came and she told me, "We'll not let you enter to the United States." I said, "Why? What is the reason?" She told me, "Because we find videos and concerns against us." I feel that I was humiliated, disappointed.
Alawi is a Canadian citizen born in Morocco, a country not affected by U.S. President Donald Trump's contested travel ban. Still, U.S. border agents have the right to question potential travelers, access their phones and passwords, and turn them away at their discretion.
I don't know if it's a rogue officer who's acting on their own impulses. I don't know if it would be even more disturbing if there were orders coming from higher up in the U.S. administration to be doing this, but we certainly seem to be seeing the start of a pattern.
And that's exactly what has some Canadian Muslim leaders worried.
We are in North America. We are not anywhere else. And we seriously stand you. Your name is Mohammed. You know what? You cannot go in. If your name is whatever, you can go in. We will never, even in our worst nightmare, imagine this could be applicable in North America.
Canada's public safety minister says he's also concerned.
This was one incident, but it's one incident too many. And I will want to examine it, but I need to get the detail of exactly who and when it happened.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection said in a statement it doesn't discriminate based on religion, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. But Alawi says her religion seemed to be a factor. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Coming up, this was some kind of snow day for Canadian skiers. Plus, Canada's deepening gender divide at work.
So who has, on average, more education? Women.
Why fixing it is a job for everyone. A 3-judge panel continues to deliberate on the constitutionality of Donald Trump's executive order, banning people from 7 mostly Muslim countries from entering the United States. But Trump went ahead today and attacked the judges anyway.
I don't ever want to call a court biased, so I won't call it biased. And we haven't had a decision yet. But courts seem to be so political, and it would be so great for our justice system if they would be able to read a statement and do what's right.
Trump went on to say the law clearly allows a president to block any class of people from entering the U.S. if he determines they would be a detriment to national security. By the way, Canada's Minister of Public Safety confirmed today that all 200 Canadian permanent residents who had their Nexus cards revoked earlier this week because of Trump's order have been reinstated as the order is currently suspended. If you spent any time on Twitter today, you may have noticed the hashtag #ShePersisted. It was a show of support for U.S. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Mr. President.
They are.
Mr. President.
She was silenced on the Senate floor by her Republican colleagues for speaking out against the man Trump has nominated as Attorney General. They charged Warren was impugning Jeff Sessions.
Are not suitable. The facts may hurt, but we're not in the United States Senate to ignore facts. We're in the United States Senate to exercise our constitutional responsibility to advise and consent on nominees.
Warren was reading a letter written by Coretta Scott King that criticized Sessions' record on civil rights. This evening, Sessions was confirmed as Attorney General. Canadian legislatures are using a slightly more tactful approach to the Trump administration. This week alone, 3 senior ministers have traveled to Washington to meet with their cabinet counterparts. The Trudeau-Trump meeting is, of course, what everyone is really waiting for. But as Lindsay Duncombe tells us, these pre-president prime minister talks could prove just as important.
Canada is plotting a new diplomacy for a new Washington. Cabinet ministers in a parade of meetings. Monday, defense. Today, global affairs. Tomorrow, finance. All of it friendly and incredibly controlled. Just listen to how carefully Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland chooses her words, talking about a potential border tax on a conference call with reporters.
There are, in the Congress, many quite strongly contrasting points of view around that plan. But I did make clear that we would be strongly opposed to any imposition of new tariffs between Canada and the United States.
Caution is warranted. Trump's call with the Australian Prime Minister made the kind of headlines Canada wants to avoid. A similar call with France reportedly went off the rails too, although not as dramatically.
I will have further updates on the Prime Minister's schedule.
With Justin Trudeau expected to visit the White House soon, his ministers are laying the groundwork.
The president will be briefed on how well did that meeting go at the Pentagon, how well did that meeting go with Treasury and the Canadian Minister of Finance, et cetera, et cetera. So it sets the scene, it can set the tone.
And this former diplomat says that tone should be drama-free.
But mostly to not get too agitated, frankly, be calm, be cool, do your homework, and present the facts.
The Trudeau-Trump visit may be high stakes and, given the men involved, high publicity, but diplomats stress cabinet-level relationships are where the day-to-day work gets done.
The relationship with Trump will be one matter, but my guess is he's going to be working through these appointees. And these appointees I mentioned are very knowledgeable about Canada.
In style and substance, it's hard to imagine 2 more different leaders than Trump and Trudeau. But Canadian officials are quick to point out both men were elected promising to help the middle class. The finance minister's speech tomorrow is titled Partners in Prosperity. Not a bad message for a president who became famous for being rich. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Bill Morneau is working to finalize his own federal budget. But as Lindsay mentioned, the finance minister is also traveling to Washington. He knows little happens in the U.S. economy that doesn't affect Canada's too. But as David Cochrane tells us, some believe that may not be a bad thing, at least not in the short term.
Bill Morneau's trip to Washington comes at a time of great uncertainty, where every decision made in the American capital can resonate at home.
The forecast process in Canada actually starts with the U.S. economy.
Former parliamentary budget officer Kevin Page argues that in the short term, the Trump agenda could be good for Canada. Big moves on infrastructure and tax cuts could boost U.S. growth and take Canada along for the ride.
And there's a positive element to this. You know, again, as we're talking about the sugar rush, so the short-term 2017, stronger U.S. economy and stronger Canadian economy.
But after every sugar rush, there's a crash. Trump's promised infrastructure spending and tax cuts would balloon the U.S. deficit, creating other problems that will also affect Canada.
Then you're dealing with inflation and higher interest rates. And yeah, that will constrain the growth in the economy, and that will put pressure on budgetary balances in addition, because there's a lot of debt.
And that's why Canadian officials are bracing for a downside. Within days of Trump's election win, senior finance officials drafted this briefing note assessing the Trump tax plan and its implications for Canada, much of which is blacked out. One concern is that a steep drop in U.S. taxes will make Canada less competitive for the companies and the skilled workers that are central to Trudeau's economic plan. And on another front, there is big concern that Canada could be collateral damage as Trump imposes his America First trade agenda, which is why Morneau will meet with White House officials and congressional leaders to protect an economic partnership worth $2 billion a day.
Our continuing goal is to engage, to ensure that we provide the information on the positive benefits of Canada-U.S. trade, both for Canadians and for Americans.
While the Trudeau government has to account for the impact of Trump, a senior government source says the upcoming budget will not be a reaction document. Instead, it will be a continuation of the Liberal agenda with a heavy focus on economic growth through infrastructure and innovation. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
One of Vladimir Putin's leading critics has been found guilty of embezzlement. Alexei Navalny faces a suspended sentence of 5 years in prison. It's the second time he's received this news. The European Court of Human Rights threw out the original case, calling it baseless and politically motivated. Navalny has criticized the retrial as a way to prevent him running against Putin in next year's election. Thousands are still protesting in Romania after the government survived a no-confidence vote. There is still distrust of the country's leaders, even after they backed off a controversial decree that would have weakened penalties for corruption crimes. In Manila, thousands are now homeless, and what little they had has gone up in flames. A fire tore through a shantytown. No one was killed. The mayor has promised to help rebuild. An Ontario woman is speaking out tonight about her young child being left out of some activities at school. He doesn't stand a chance of appearing on stage in a school concert or play. Can't be in class photos either. Natalie Collada explains why.
There's lots of new things to explore in a kindergarten classroom, but social media is one thing Mother Genevieve Maroux-Peltier felt could wait.
He doesn't even know what social media is.
Her son's school sometimes posts photos and videos of students online, but Maroux-Peltier didn't want her son's image on any social media, so she didn't sign the school's blanket consent form. What she didn't realize, that would come with unexpected consequences.
He's not being able to fully participate in the educational opportunity because we didn't provide consent for the social media component.
Her son isn't in the class photo because it could make its way onto social media. Even his individual photo wasn't allowed on a display in a self-portrait art project. The school board says it's just trying to honor the parents' wishes because it can't control what other people put online.
His own picture was not there, but the drawing was there, not with his name on it. And that's it, because we could not honestly say to the other parents, if you're coming to visit the classroom and you want to take a kind of angle of the picture of the drawing of your children in this picture, that the other one won't be there.
I said, please include him in all activities, document his educational experience, his lived experience in the school, like the other children. Don't put that online. They're not giving me the opportunity to make that distinction.
But cybersecurity privacy expert Mick Binder says there should be some sort of accommodation.
When it comes down to particular events where the parent may have a particular concern, it's not at all addressed because it's assumed that it's already being consented to.
Ontario's former privacy commissioner says school boards may want to consider more detailed forms.
given the risks associated with social media, it may be time for the school to give a more defined consent.
Unless that happens, Marie Pelletier says her son will continue to be left out. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
An avalanche closed part of the Trans-Canada Highway for several hours today in southeastern BC. No one was injured, but more heavy snow is expected tonight and could force it to close again. This is the latest in a series of winter storms to batter BC. Schools were closed early today, and Vancouver traffic was snarled as people tried to get home before snow began falling. This storm is bringing a potentially dangerous mix of heavy snow, freezing rain, and high winds to Vancouver, the Fraser Valley, and Vancouver Island. The other coast is taking a winter's beating as well. Schools and businesses were closed across New Brunswick today as residents dug out from their latest snow and ice storm. Even more snow, this time with high winds, is expected tomorrow. Award-winning Canadian author Richard B. Wright has died. He'd been writing for more than 30 years before he gained national acclaim, winning the Giller Prize in 2001, the Governor-General's Literary Award, as well as the Trillium Book Award for his novel Clara Callan. He wrote 14 other novels as well as a memoir and taught English for years in St. Catharines, Ontario. Wright died in hospital yesterday after a fall. He was 79 years old. While the gap in pay between men and women hasn't disappeared, another workplace fault line has cracked open, and this time, men are the ones looking up. The story from Duncan McHugh is straight ahead. Our continuing series, The Next Canada, pays a stop tonight on the employment line and a new kind of gender divide. Girls have long zoomed ahead at school. But in a rapidly changing economy, the consequences for boys are suddenly dire because the jobs that used to greet so many of them as men are either going or gone, and no one seems to have the fix for a group whose very identity is at stake. Here's the CBC's Duncan McHugh.
The weather these days suits the mood at National Steel Car. One of Hamilton's biggest employers is in a big slump. Giovanni Defan used to come here every day, proud to be a steel worker.
I'm a welder. Oh, I love using my hands. And to me, welding is not so much about laying a bead, eh? It's just like, it talks to you.
Welding, not just a job to him, but an art, which meant it hurt bad when he got laid off 4 years ago. Now, Giovanni, along with hundreds of other laid-off steelworkers, makes his daily trek here, the employment center, to scan the job board, hunting, searching, without much luck.
I find to make a living in welding, you basically have to knock your head all over the place because the contracts, the jobs come far and few in between.
He's landed a few odd jobs in carpentry as a mechanic, but his passion is welding, and there's just nothing steady out there for a 47-year-old.
Well, how am I going to feed my kids? What's going to happen now?
Not easy after once earning $37 an hour, but Giovanni isn't alone. There are more and more blue-collar men in Canada who are unemployed and struggling to adapt. It's an unemployment problem that was unimaginable a few generations ago, when the working world was a man's world, whether they were educated or not. But jobs in traditionally male-dominated industries, mining, oil and gas, fishing, have been on a downward slide for quite a while. In Canada, in the past 4 years alone, nearly 70,000 jobs have been lost in manufacturing and agriculture combined. Why? Brawn is getting trumped by technology.
It takes one person to run a robot. You know, it doesn't take 2 or 3 people. I mean, in some cases where we had to line up sheets, panels for a train, it will take up to 10 people. Now, you slap one robot on that line, it only takes one person to make sure that the robot is doing the work right.
Is it frustrating to get replaced by a robot?
Oh, for sure. It can't weld better than me. It can't. Good morning. I left you a message.
Giovanni finds himself stuck at home a lot.
See if it's possible that we could meet up the 23rd. Oh, yeah, I could, definitely.
Needing help, but uneasy with handouts. Now, a guy so good at fusing metal struggles to keep his family together. He has 2 daughters and a social assistance check, barely enough to put food on the table.
You start to lose your self-worth. For one, I'm getting older, you know, and companies are not looking for people my age. You're starting to be hungry?
Yeah, I'm hungry. Not me.
What's really going on? Is this really a trade that I should stick with, you know, because I got into it late?
He's not the only man asking that question.
I see more women coming to post-secondary education.
This economics expert says the pool of unemployed tradesmen with non-transferable skills is growing.
It's getting tougher for certain males. And it's getting tougher because their jobs are disappearing, and a lot of them are good jobs, like in the auto industry and in manufacturing plants. And to some extent, it isn't as tough for women.
That may be tough to swallow in a world where men still call the shots, but consider this. Nearly 200,000 jobs were created within the healthcare and social service industries over the past 4 years. Yet in 2016 in Canada, only 10% of registered nurses were men and 12% of healthcare aides. Bottom line, the service sector is the fastest growing part of Canada's economy, and it's mostly women filling those jobs in service and caring professions, often more apt to be patient, empathetic, and nurturing, and versatile enough to learn new skills.
Our labor market is relying on education, and we don't do a lot of training on skills development. So who has, on average, more education? Women. If you look around a university like Ryerson, particularly in the business area and in a number of other areas, there's probably a majority of the students are women.
It's not only Ryerson. On college and university campuses across Canada, there's been a dramatic reversal of the gender balance. Back in 1970, 39% of students were women. Fast forward to 2010, and 57% of students are women. Attaining higher education isn't necessarily translating into higher earnings for women. The income gap remains real in Canada. On average, women earn 72 cents for every dollar a man makes doing the same type of work. But it is women getting better grades, more degrees, becoming doctors and lawyers and CEOs. Most of all, it's women better prepared to adapt to a changing workforce, not men.
I think they're going to have to adjust their expectations, and if you go down the ladder and look at schooling, I think in high schools, students who are coming out are going to really have to be aware of the fact that there aren't going to be good jobs for you for your entire work career if all you've got is a high school education or not even a high school completion.
But high schools in Canada have a boy crisis of their own.
What will affect the look of the image is the aperture and the shutter. So,
over 20 plus years of teaching, John Mason has watched girls steadily rise to the top, boys descend to the bottom.
We have a gap now between boys and girls in their educational attainment, and that gap is growing. You could say, overall boys' education attainment level has been going down, and that's not a direction that's good for them. It's not a direction that's good for society. I can tell you're going easy on me. Oh, get in there.
This is how he started to try and motivate his disengaged and underperforming male students. Boys Club, a lunchtime program just for boys, to let off some steam. At first, his teaching colleagues razzed him. Not anymore. Not when boys make up 70% of high school dropouts.
Just generally, the girls will participate in class more, they'll put up their hand more, they comment more. It seems that girls just automatically or intuitively are aware of the benefits of education and they appreciate what they're getting. And the boys will kind of sit back and not participate as much, partly because the girls are doing all the work. They're stepping up, they're getting involved. And we need now to light a fire under these boys and motivate them. Who can tell me what?
None of this is news to boys who see girls outperforming them in the classroom every day.
Like usually when you see in a class, it's usually the guys who are like fooling around or like getting off topic and like hitting each other and stuff. Guys like have a, I guess, shorter attention span.
Why does that happen?
I don't know. I guess it's where we were wired or something.
We're an interesting species.
Yeah.
Which is why, to them, Boys Club is more than fun and games.
I think playing sports, it energizes you to go into your next classes. I think more alert in class.
If you had a really good game against your friends and you destroyed them, you go into class happy, you're excited to go to class, So you feel good about the rest of the day.
After I play sports in Boys Club, I burn a lot of energy, so I'm more calm when I go to class and I'm ready to focus and my mind's set on the goals for the day.
If we have a large segment of society that's not being productive and they're doing things that we would classify as very bad behaviors, that later on in life we need to address that. And right now it's largely boys.
Because if schools only punish boys with boy problems,
relationships and employment have a connection.
Eventually, they grow into men with men problems.
Accessing these services and working with other men with these situations, it's literally turned my life around. And
this men's center encourages men to tackle their problems in a very un-guy-like way by talking about it.
I lost my ability to work because of a workplace injury.
Some here talk about lost jobs and what comes with that, losing their masculine identity.
When men suffer through unemployment or underemployment, it can affect their sense of identity because men are still often identified with their professional life, with their identity as breadwinners. That can bring on issues of depression, that can have a real serious effect on their mental health, and that in turn can lead to the erosion of their family situation.
What is my aim? What is my goal now? And that has a direct impact on your workplace.
This men's group may be small, but it signals a dramatic cultural shift. Men taking on new roles in the family, dealing with mental health instead of ignoring it, and men who need to start to consider so-called pink-collar jobs.
I've been a part of supporting to get women to go into the engineering and the science and the technology professions, and we're still not nearly done with that job, but we've done virtually nothing to attract men into professions that have tended to be more dominated by women now. I think it's all part of the same kind of gender equality exercise.
Back in Hamilton, it's not gender equity eating away at Giovanni. He just wants a job.
I have kids to feed. I have kids to take care of, to mind, okay? And it's just frustrated. You know, I'm not picky about the jobs per se. I just want to see a job come and stay.
But it may mean hanging up the blowtorch. Because if men keep hanging on to manly work identities, guess who will be getting called the weaker sex? Duncan McHugh, CBC News, Hamilton.
After the break, more on one of today's top stories, the fight over refugees. The Trump administration has made its position clear.
We're going to have a very, very strict ban, and we're going to have extreme vetting.
Now, as everyone waits for a U.S. court decision, what are the implications for Canada? That's next on The National.
That's what we pray for. The people of Canada and the government of Canada, they're gonna accept us as who we are. Because now we're gonna lose some of our fingers.
That was an asylum seeker who lost fingers to frostbite trying to get into Canada from the U.S. Testimony of someone who walked the desperate path that goes through the border town of Emerson, Manitoba. If the U.S. travel ban is upheld by the courts, all U.S. refugee claims will be temporarily blocked. And already, asylum seekers are looking north.
We're going to have a very, very strict ban, and we're going to have extreme vetting.
For refugees who waited for years, passing a gauntlet of interviews and paperwork, Trump's ban threw dreams into doubt.
I have prepared for this journey, for this immigration, for 2 years. I sold my house, I sold my properties.
In response, Canada presented itself as a nation with open arms. Justin Trudeau tweeting, "To those fleeing persecution, terror, and war, Canadians will welcome you." But for asylum seekers refused refugee status in the U.S., they still get a cold shoulder thanks to Canadian law.
So if they first arrive in the United States and then want to come to Canada to make their asylum claim, they'll be pushed back to the United States.
Refugee advocates want this so-called safe third country agreement changed. And so far, Ottawa hasn't budged.
The United States actually has no interest in maintaining this agreement. If there's, because it means that they have more asylum seekers than they otherwise would.
As long as the agreement stays, asylum seekers stranded in the U.S. have few options and lots of fear. To get at what these asylum seekers face and the impact here in Canada, I spoke earlier to Bashir Khan in Winnipeg, an immigration lawyer who was representing 17 asylum seekers, including some of those we saw earlier. So, Mr. Khan, tell me, what is the story? Why are they seeking asylum? What have they been through?
Well, they've been through hell, basically. 17 of these asylum seekers are from Ghana, a country in West Africa. And I will just tell you the story of 8 of them. 8 of them are homosexual. They're gay. It's a crime to be gay in Ghana. It's a criminal offense. And they've been hounded because of the homosexuality. They've been nearly murdered. And they escaped Ghana just with the clothes on their back. In the U.S., they were imprisoned in United States immigration detention between a 9 to 22-month period. They had their refugee claims heard while in detention. There was no lawyer available for them. There was no legal aid. They weren't able to make long-distance calls so as to be able to gather evidence that they may need. And of course, they were denied. And when they were denied, they were then paroled into society pending their deportation. And then they realized the U.S. justice system failed them. And there was a great white note. There's Canada, the Trudeau strong and free. And they decided to go to Minneapolis. And there are 200,000 Somali Americans. And they learned about Canada. And then they came through an open prairie field across the 49 parallel from the North Dakota, Manitoba.
And a few of them almost died, right?
Yes, a few of them almost died. In fact, 2 of my clients, Saidu and Razak, they both lost their hands. One of them has a thumb, but they've lost their hands.
I just want to get this right. The safe third country agreement means that if they had gone through an official post at the border, that they would have been turned back, that's why they risked their lives running through these frozen fields, because of that agreement.
That is absolutely correct. And it's an inhuman agreement, it's unjust, it's unfair, and it's putting people's lives at risk.
So when the first few asylum seekers arrived through those frozen fields, they were really welcomed with open arms. Now that there's been so many, there's some pushback. People in the town going, we're not sure we can handle this. Are you concerned about where things may be going?
No, I'm not, because I think that is a very minority opinion. The Canadian farmer is very hospitable. They are the first Canadians that these asylum seekers see, and they are nothing but hospitable, polite, and respectful towards them, and they are great ambassadors for Canada. So the Manitoban farmer has a great amount of respect in my heart.
But sounds like you want some changes from the government on the Safe Country Agreement.
Right. I mean, look, who is to blame for Saidu and Razak losing their hands? It is we, the Canadian people. We have done this to him.
Bashir Khan, thank you very much for your point of view tonight.
Thank you.
Just ahead, a change of pace. One woman's poetic slam against domestic violence. A student, a black Muslim student. There are more than a few facets to the young woman you're about to meet. And through this short burst, Rua Al-Jeed speaks volumes. She's the next profile from our colleagues at the program Exhibitionists.
My name is Rua Al-Jeed. I also go by philosopher in the poetry scene sometimes. I'm a third-year biomedical and electrical engineering student. I was born in Sudan. I moved to Canada when I was 2 years old. I lived in London up until 15, and then I moved here to Ottawa. Ottawa is where I got introduced to the spoken word poetry scene. In grade 12, I was invited to a breakfast at Parliament Hill. One of the performers was Jenna Tunya, and that was the first time that I'd actually seen spoken word poetry live. After the event happened, I sent her an email telling her I was really interested and I wanted to get involved. And then a year later, I finally took her advice and went out. Together, he and she would make masterpieces with their bodies. The first slam that I went to was the Ottawa Youth Poetry Slam. I was the Ottawa Youth Poetry Slam champion for that year.
I refuse to let go, because where would I be today if Rosa Parks had let go of her seat? I was never born the wrong color, and the only thing my pigment will tell you is I was born to be a fighter.
My favorite part about spoken word poetry is the fact that it's so accessible. Anyone can do it. You only have 3 minutes usually, but you can say so much in 3 minutes. She neglected her dreams of becoming an artist because with him, she already was. My activism is basically just me, I guess, advocating for pretty basic human rights. I mainly talk about subjects that are related to me, only because I find it easier to talk to, and especially as a Muslim woman, African Arab teenager. There's just so much that I can talk about, in terms of sexism, in terms of racism. My position makes it very easy for me to talk about a lot of issues.
Even when my little sister was harassed for the color of her skin, I didn't understand the possibility that I was somehow connected to the slaves who sang, "Wade in the water."
For the 16 days of activism, I was introduced to Arooj Mian. She's a representative for WISE, and they're basically in charge of running the campaign here in Canada. I sent her a few poems related to, violence against women, and we chose Looking Over Her Shoulder.
I whisper, counting the sounds of my footsteps as I walk down the street late at night. 1, 2, 3. I stop whispering so I can focus more on making sure that the only sound of feet hitting the pavement are my own.
I performed last year in 2014 at the launch of the 16 Days of Activism campaign. I also performed at the final ceremony. My latest poem, Primary Colors, is about domestic violence. Until one day he used his fist as a paintbrush and he painted her in red, blue, and yellow. He painted her in blood, bruises, in tears. He painted her in silence. I did have a few people telling me, they had their own history with domestic violence. I always find it really interesting how people approach me, I think, a bit more easily because they relate to something that I said. And it's really touching when people are able to tell me, basically a stranger, about their own personal stories. It just makes you feel like you actually did something by speaking up.
I love you could cover up the scars on her face, arms, and legs. I love you could make her forget all the time she wished he would just kill her instead, but I love you.
Exhibitionist. When we come back, a look at a crazy day on the Swiss slopes for some super grand Canucks. Let's check first the day's business numbers. The TSX was up 55 points. The dollar increased 1/10 of a cent. In New York, the Dow lost 35 points, but the Nasdaq hit another record high. The price of oil closed up 17 cents a barrel.
I'm Kelly Crow. Tomorrow on The Current, in Fake Silk, Paul Blanc argues that the manufacture of rayon, like asbestos and mercury, was a death sentence for many industry workers. That's on The Current, weekdays at 8:30 on CBC Radio 1.
True North Calling, a new series, begins February 17th on CBC.
Are you using the Vardon grip?
I'm using Lavardon.
Are you watching this, TV?
Yeah, it was just a little hard to understand, so I want a record of it.
Okay, delete that,
Can
please.
I get a copy of that?
Hey, I'm again.
This was a banner day for Canada's alpine ski team. Eric Gay of Quebec won gold at the World Championships in Switzerland in the men's Super G. At 35, it makes him the oldest world ski champion ever. Same event and another medal for Canada. This one, bronze for BC's Manny Osborne-Parody. A new art installation in Germany is attracting both admiration and anger. These upturned buses were erected in front of a famous church in Dresden that survived the Second World War, inspired by buses in Aleppo, Syria, used to protect people from snipers, a monument of remembrance and hope. But some are upset by its timing, just ahead of the anniversary of the Allied bombings of the city. Another vehicle to show you, but with the immediate danger all too real. A truck in China was left hanging over a cliff after its driver lost control in slippery conditions. It took rescuers several hours to secure it in place and pull the 2 young children and 2 adults inside to safety. And that's the National for this Wednesday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Wendy Mesley. Thanks for watching.